the very word Beatles. I said, where did that come from? Why Beatles? And John said, well, you see, there's time beats, and they thought time beats, Mersey beats. And John did that quantum leap and just went Beatle, added an LE to it, and that became that. Again, not quantum leap, a kind of lateral thinking.
Well, the Beatles in Hamburg were always the Beatles. They weren't the Silver Beatles or any other color Beatles, but they were also the Beat Brothers for the simple fact that the record company at the time thought the name was silly, especially for Germany, didn't even understand it. So I had to come up with a name that was acceptable for a German public, and it was the Beat Brothers.
So was that the Star Club? What was the Star Club?
No, this is before the Star Club. Star Club started a bit later. Well, we started off in a place called the Kaiserkeller, then we went to the top 10, and then the Star Club happened. But we were all together right at the beginning in the Kaiserkeller. Beatles as well, and many other groups, of course.
We're here on this rather grey day in the grounds of St Peter's Church, Woolton, where, on the 6th of July 1957, John Lennon met Paul McCartney. John's group, the Quarrymen, were playing at the annual Garden Fete, the fundraising event of the church, on that afternoon, when Paul McCartney was in the audience, having been brought here by their mutual friend Ivan Vaughan. Ivan lived near John Lennon, but went to school with Paul, so he knew them both. In Paul, Ivan saw someone who could play a guitar like a guitar. John at that stage was playing his like a banjo. Paul could tune a guitar, not John, and Paul could remember all the words of all the songs, whereas John ad-libbed. After the Garden Fete, the group moved over to the church hall just across the road, where John and Paul talked at length, and John realised that Paul would be good for his group. But he felt threatened with this good-looking boy, better equipped musically, so John did nothing. But after about 10 days he came to his senses, and he then sent a message to Paul to come and join the group. So this is where, in my mind, it all began. John meeting Paul.
Well, when I first became involved with Beatles, say, it was Pete Best, not Ringo. They were all sort of individuals, like Pete attracted a lot of screaming girls for his looks. it didn't matter if he had talent or not. He did. I'm not saying he didn't, but it didn't matter because they would, you know, look up to Peters. He was a very, very good-looking young man.
So I knew Pete. He's a very nice fellow, very quiet. Kept himself very much to himself, although he did enjoy the attention of the girls. George was also quite quiet, although he did join in bits of the fun and the performance, you know, the other two used to cause.
George was a very quiet, and I've been saying this for years, but through his recent passing away, it's become more known. But I always knew George as a very quiet, spoken introvert, if you like, but knew how to play his instrument and knew his music. Paul was, in my mind, in my memory of Paul, still does really, quite Americanized.
Paul was always the keen one. He was always the one that wanted to do things and check the mics and what was the club like, and, you know, even down to security. He was always the one that went past the actual show itself. I remember one day, we all got drunk. Well, I'm going out of turn out of chronological order, really. I'll come back to that in a minute. So Paul was the one who was the keen. He was the sort of, you could say, the head of the group. John was the voice. I mean, John's voice, I still say it's the best voice in rock and roll, you know. Very, very distinguishable. He just loved rock and roll. He wasn't interested in didn't even care how much they got paid, John. He was just doing it for fun.
And they called John Lennon the Singing Rage. And I thought, well, the Singing Rage, well, you know, there's a lot of Elvis is the rage, Cliff Richard was the rage, you know, or the rage at the time. But I realised it was a double meaning, because he was the rage of the cavern, but he sang, every song he sang in a rage, you know.
When they first started appearing at the Cavern Club, there was a guy named Derry Wilkie who had been to Germany, to Hamburg, and he came home and he was walking along Duke Street and he heard the Beatles practicing in the basement of the Jacaranda, and he recognised them as the Beatles because he'd been to see them a few times before he went off to Germany, and he banged on the ground for somebody to come up and open the door for him, and it was Paul McCartney. And of course Paul knew Derry and various other people, like they all know each other or knew each other, and he said, listen man, he said, you know, I've just come back from Germany, from Hamburg. It's fantastic over there. He said, you should get in touch. He said, and here's a phone number for you. And he passed on the phone number of the Kaiser Keller in Hamburg. And he said, if you phone there, you are asked for Mr. Koschmider, I think his name was, Koschmider or Mider, and tell him that you know me, and I would highly recommend you.
Yeah, there's these four guys, as I say, that most of us have not seen before, and they were Stuart Sutcliffe, John, Paul, and George. Their drummer evidently couldn't be there because he had a day job. So anyway, we all went on, did our bit for Larry Parnes, and Billy Fury was there, sitting there, sort of watching the various bands. And each band went on in turn, and then eventually came down to this band called the Silver Beatles to do their thing, you know, and they got up and they borrowed the drummer from the Big Three, a guy called Johnny Hutchison, who's one of Liverpool's famous drummers of the time, you know. And they did their thing, and funny enough, you know, okay, there's a bit rough and ready, and but okay. And I remember the bass player, Stuart, didn't face low palms, he had his back to them, you know. And whether that was a moody or he was a bit ashamed of showing what he was doing on the bass, I don't know.
Well, it actually began, I went to Hamburg to play at the Top 10 Club, and I went into the Top 10 Club following the Beatles. They were finishing off their period of time. I'm not sure how long they were playing there, but I went in there and I met Paul and John and George outside the Top 10 Club. They were packing their gear into a van, and they came over and introduced themselves because at that time I was doing a regular TV show in England, Drumby and Oh Boy, and these were regular TV shows that were every Saturday night. And unbeknownst to me, that Paul McCartney was a Little Richard fan, and I was kind of known as England's Little Richard.
You going to mug me?
Am I going to mug you?
Is that gorgeous or what, eh?
And I believe I can run a decent marathon.
Thank you very much.
Download Veely now.
When the Beatles were billed in the very, very early days, I remember in '61 they were billed as just straight from Hamburg, because while they were trying to make a name for themselves, when they were going to play in Hamburg, they'd be in Hamburg for up to 6 weeks, 2 months at a time. They'd come back and their image was changing. From jeans, they were going into the leather trousers and leather jackets, and the hair was starting to come down. And a lot of the local people thought this band from Germany are fantastic. Don't they speak English well? They actually thought they were a German band. And the Beatles from Germany was the way they were getting billed all the time. And of course from the Silver Beatles, then changed to the Beatles. But the local people just adored them some way because the Beatles were trying to be different. And I think Liverpool, even right up to this day, people in Liverpool love you if you don't follow any trends, if you want to try and be your own style. And the Beatles just didn't follow any trends. While everyone was trying to be Cliff Richard or Elvis, they just wanted to be the Beatles and play hard rock and roll. That was it.
We wanted to do rock and roll, you see, and the first thing, My Bonnie, we did was a hit in Germany, and of course it's still selling all around the world because of them. But then we should have followed it up with something really rocking.
My Bonnie lies over the ocean. My Bonnie lies over the sea. My Bonnie lies over the ocean. Bring back my Bonnie to me. Last night as I lay on my pillow, won't you bring it on back? Bring back my heart to me.
Yeah, basically, that's it.
They were playing at Latham Hall, which is the Brian Kelly show. And after the show, the girls had been eyeing the Beatles up, which they always did, you know. And one or two of them were eyeing Stuart up because he was so shy, you know. And this gang, the boyfriends of the girls, you know, followed the band outside. And one of them attacked Stuart, knocked him over and kicked him in the head. John came running out and hit him the fellow that hard. John couldn't play the guitar for 2 weeks. They sprained his wrist, you know. And that was one of the few times I wasn't there. I got told by one of the people who had followed the band around a lot, and he said John was crying that night. Well, I firmly believe that's where Stuart got his tumour from. It didn't come out till probably 2 years later, you know.
I think one of the biggest changes I do remember from the Beatles was when Pete Best was given the sack. We were actually invited along to see Brian Epstein at the time. He just signed the Merseybeat up, so we went along to the office, and Pete Best was walking out of the office as we were going in with a very long face. We said hello to him, he completely ignored us and walked past. And we found out later that Brian had said to him, I'm afraid we're bringing a new drummer in, we're bringing Ringo Starr in. But if you want to stay in the business, I suggest that you join the Merseybeats. Well, he turned that down by saying, I'm not going to join those little kids. But as it happened, we wouldn't have had Pete anyway because we were quite happy with John Banks, who was our drummer at the time. Quite happy. But I did notice a great change in the band then. And after that, we went along, we appeared with them at the Cavern the next day. And I remember they were doing a lunchtime session, and as they turned up, George had been assaulted outside. This was to do the first show with Ringo Starr. And George came in with a big black eye, and we said, what's happened to you? And he said, they're all taking it out on me. He said, they're frightened to take it out on John, because he'll flatten them, so they've all picked on me. They've all punched me. He said, it's my fault for throwing Pete Best out. Because Pete Best had such a legion of fans. He was possibly the most popular at the very early days. Because he was so good looking and so handsome and very quiet, and he had all the girls screaming for him at the time. But I think the sound changed as soon as Ringo joined the band. To me it was slightly different. He did a different bass drum pattern. Pete was a lot simpler, a lot heavier player. And to me they went more to an all-round band than the heavy rock and roll as they started off with. I mean, as it happened, they went from strength to strength then, but I think the sound somehow wasn't quite the same.
I remember one event where it sort of changed, and I realised the Beatles are going to make it. I mean, from day one I knew they were going to make it. I just knew they were going to do something. I didn't know how big they were going to be, but I knew they were going to be big, not just around Liverpool, not just around Merseyside. One of the first reasons for me saying that is I remember them coming back from, Ringo joined them by then, and they'd been to record, and it was the follow-up to Love Me Do, it was Please Please Me, and they changed it quite a bit. They wrote it initially as a Roy Orbison type of song, you know, like, last night I said these words to my girl, one of those, you know. And they came back with a new interpretation of it, faster, Paul singing a top melody over John, and George coming in with Paul doing the backing vocals. And it just blew me away. And I remember getting shivers down me. They were playing it live, the new version of it, live on the Cavern, around the corner from here. And I just said, oh my God, that's it, that's the one. That's going to be #1 all over the world. And to make a bold statement like that, which I did to myself and to friends as well, as a 15-year-old boy, was something else, you know. But I realised then that they were going to do it. It was just, the way they changed it, it was just an immediate #1 record.
I was doing a show in London called Oh Lovely War, musical, at Wyndham's Theatre. And they came to see it, and John particularly saw the show, and he said, "Hey, Vic, you got to be in our film." Right. And that was it, and I met the producer and the director, and I was in Hard Day's Night. When they turned up, and I loved the music, and suddenly when they turned up, it was absolutely sensational. When I first walked on the set, I was playing a television director in Hard Day's Night, and as I walked on the set before we started shooting, we started to talk, and it was as if we'd known each other all our lives. It was the most extraordinary thing. I think it's because they came from Liverpool, and I came from South Wales, that those kind of backgrounds, that we sort of hit it off straight away, and we just started talking, and, well, we haven't really stopped. Well, the most extraordinary thing about them was they were really, truly extraordinary because they were really, truly ordinary.
You treat like ordinary passenger, passenger, you say.
Now, what I mean by that is, to be truly ordinary is marvellous. They were truly ordinary because they had no hang-ups. They didn't have any attitudes. They didn't have any chips on their shoulders. They were just there.
I hear that you're going to give some poetry recital. I hear you're going to give some poetry recital.
Beethoven's poems.
Well, when's this? At the City of London Festival. I heard that you.
Yeah, he knows. You see, it's a secret. Don't tell anybody.
What poems you going to give?
Beethoven's. You remember him? Beethoven.
Looking forward to this American trip. Have you had any reaction over there? You got any fan clubs going? Is there
well, there's one supposed to be started, and they're getting quite good response, you know. 12,000 letters a day.
And in the middle of what you could call a kind of, well, in the hurricane of Beatlemania, there was a still small centre. In the middle of it, these four lads sat talking, and they used to say to me, "What did you talk about on the set of those films?" And I said, "Well, we'd be sitting behind this bit of white stuff out there on Hard Day's Night particularly. There'd be all these fans screaming, and we'd be sitting in there talking, and we talk about the Freudian interpretation of dreams as opposed to the Jungian interpretation of dreams." We were talking about what dreams meant, or they'd say things like, John would say, "I wonder, did Beethoven ever write any music for himself rather than for his patron?" They used to talk about things like, well, have laughs as well and jokes, but really straight into fascinating conversations. And when I used to say to people, they used to say the Beatles talked about Freud, because you see, at that time, you must remember that the world's changed a lot then. Pop stars, so-called, or the Fab Four, so-called, people outside thought they were dim-witted idiots. Anything but. And when they wanted to discover something, John was very hungry about reading about things. Let's go somewhere, let's go to the theatre, let's go. They wanted to know about things. There were people who were really hungry for information. I mean, the laughs they had in the middle of it. But you see, because they were a still small centre, and there were four ordinary lads, and by that I mean truly extraordinary, by being really basic, that they kept themselves sane.
It's great, but on the first night, as you may know, we had a bit of trouble because we suddenly found there was a radio programme just sort of plugging into everything, and they'd overloaded all the amps and everything. It was boom.
What's the sort of stuff they like over there on the parade?
Wilder stuff, I think.
I said to John once, right, I said, "John, be careful what you write because people believe what you say." And he said, "Vic, I'm only a songwriter. I'm no martyr. I mean, look what happened.
You seem to have been very close to John in particular. What about the other Beatles?
I was lucky, actually, because I did spend about, on and off, about 10 years. Because we wrote a play, right, together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting in my flat in London. I had a flat then in Manchester Street. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were supposed to be writing the play.
Mm.
And John suddenly turned to me and said, "Hey, Vic, let's go somewhere warm." And I thought he meant another room. And he picked up the phone. Oh, he said, "Sorry, did I wake you? Vic and I want to go somewhere warm." And we ended up in Africa.
Wow.
I mean, that morning, within 10 minutes, the car came and took us away, and off we went to Morocco to finish the play. But that impulsive. I remember when we got on the plane and we were in Casablanca. There was a car to meet us in Casablanca, driving through the desert towards Marrakesh. And suddenly John, sitting in the back of the car, turned to me and said, "Hey, Vic, you got any money on you?" I said, "No." I said, "About a $5." He said, "That's okay, won't need any money, I'll just sign, you know." And he said, "Nobody'll know me here, it'll be great." And I must do this because it's fun, ladies went by with the ashmacks like this. And as we came out of the car, I said, "Nobody know me." Ladies in the ashmacks went by and went, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." Couldn't go anywhere.
So their stardom was throughout the world, of course.
Oh, yeah. You see, the thing is about them, when people said when they first appeared, what were they like? And I said, well, in their truly ordinariness, in the fact of basic, down-to-earth, decent chaps.
With a song for Christmas. How about that?
Gary Crimble to you, Gary Crimble to you, Gary Crimble, dear Rudolph, Gary Crimble, me too. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose. How many shiny shiny?
And the same with George. Any library went into, there'd be a guy who would say, "Oh no, you should take this book." They had a kind of ordinariness about them that because they got together and did the music, but they never lost that. You see, they never lost that what people call down to earth.
What do you think is going to happen to you if they nationalise you then?
Southern Ireland. Well, we'll have to move out, won't we?
Yeah.
Have to go and live in Germany or someplace like that.
Southern Ireland is nice down there.
Only half an hour away.
Yeah. In actual fact, had time to vote yourselves?
No, we missed it actually. We
were having dinner at the time.
Have you been heckled at all? Have you ever had...
Oh, yeah, we used to have it, and especially in the early days.
Oh, yeah.
But John had a perfect answer. What was it? Short off.
I had the joke about the...
No, that was the other day.
During the last few weeks, the Grumman group and the Hume group and the Wilson group have been edging you off the papers. Have you been envious of all these groups?
No, we sell more
The whole
records.
situation looks pretty grim, doesn't it? That's a good one. Good old George.
No, good luck to them.
Have any of the political parties actually contacted you and said, would you say publicly you'd vote for us?
Oh, no, because then the others don't buy the records.
What about this business of being on the wane? Is that all over?
Well, we get it about every 2 months. Somebody says you're finished, you're on the wane. You know, they say Dave Clark's in, Brian Poole's in.
Are we?
You know, they're probably all in, but we're still having a good time ourselves.
You don't look too bad for four lads. You don't look too bad for four lads likely to be on your way to the dole queue, do you?
No, well, we passed one the other day, didn't we, Paul?
Yes, we passed.
We're still on the dole as well. Don't tell Harold.
Just getting back to the election for a moment, have you taken much interest in it? Have you
taken interest? You know, because it's interesting and it's exciting. But we didn't actually get the chance to vote, as we told you before.
Told you before.
Have you read the speeches?
Didn't even
Read them.
printed.
Read the comics.
You've been away.
Saw the film. Read the comics.
Have you watched the television?
Well, we will as soon as you go.
We'll give us a telly in the next room.
Springs from the fact of what I said before, they were hungry for knowledge. They wanted to find out.
How often have you taken LSD?
About 4 times.
And where did you get it from?
Oh, you know, I mean, if I was to say where I got it from, you know, it's illegal and everything. It's silly to say that.
Don't you believe that this was a matter which you should have kept private?
But the thing is, you know, that I was asked a question by a newspaper. And the decision was whether to tell a lie or to tell him the truth, you know. I decided to tell him the truth. But I really didn't want to say anything, you know, because if I'd had my decision, you know, if I had it my way, I wouldn't have told anyone, you know, because I'm not trying to spread the word about this. But the man from the newspaper is the man from the mass medium, you know. I'll keep it a personal thing. If he does too, you know, if he keeps it quiet. But he wanted to spread it, so it's his responsibility, you know, for spreading it, not mine.
But you're a public figure, and you said it in the first place, and you must have known that it would have made the newspapers.
Yes, but to say it, you know, is only to tell the truth. I'm telling the truth, you know. I don't know what everyone's so angry about.
Well, do you think you have now encouraged your fans to take drugs?
I don't think it'll make any difference, you know. I don't think my fans are going to take drugs just because I did, you know. But the thing is, that's not the point anyway, you know. I was asked whether I had or not. And then from then on, the whole bit about how far it's going to go and how many people it's going to encourage is up to the newspapers and up to you, you know, on television. I mean, you're spreading this now at this moment. This is going into all the homes, you know, in Britain. And I'd rather it didn't, you know. But you're asking me the question. You want me to be honest. I'll be honest, you know.
But as a public figure, surely you've got a responsibility to lots and
No,
lots
it's
of
you've
teenagers.
got the responsibility. You've got the responsibility not to spread this now. You know, I'm quite prepared to keep it as a very personal thing, if you will too. If you'll shut up about it, I will.
What annoyed me at that time, and I even said it at that time, and I'll say it again, here we go. Because they were pop stars, because they were rich and world famous, but pop stars, they shouldn't be interested in finding out about mysticism, or they shouldn't want to know those sort of things. If they'd been four lads, and this is the fault of England really, and the class structure here, if they were four sons of some lord or something, whatever, and they were in university say they were at Oxford, and they decided that year they would do their rooms Chinese, and only read Chinese this year, and only eat Chinese food. People say, well, of course, they're studying blah, blah, blah. But because they were pop stars who wanted to do that and not just racket round nightclubs and pick up girls and carry on, which is what they should do, people were very bemused. They couldn't stand it. They couldn't stand it. The fact you see in the 60s was very important. And this is one of the most important facts about the Beatles that people forget. I'm preaching now. It's the Welsh bit in me, I'm sorry. The most important thing about the Beatles for me at that time, it was the first time that people abroad had heard English spoken as it is spoken in this country.
Royalty. Your language has got to be pretty good, obviously. This thing about Ted, he's saying that he couldn't distinguish.
I can't understand
the
Teddy.
Queen's English.
I can't understand Teddy saying that at all, really.
It's the first time that the young spoke directly to the young without any intermediary. It's the first time people heard people saying, how are you? Because until then, all around the world, people had only heard the BBC the World Service, and they all wore dinner jackets even on radio, or they'd only heard the governor of the island saying, well, now here we are, we'll beat you over the head with the Bible, run up the Union Jack, and you're British, you see. And so they heard that sound. But suddenly they heard that sound. They heard people in press conferences when journalists would say to Ringo, why don't you smile? And he'd say, I haven't got a smiling face. They heard people talking, as we normally hear them in this country, talking with this strange accent. And of course they had long hair.
Girls or boys here?
Actually, we aimed at sort of the young boys, but we seem to be getting a cross-section of almost everyone. For example, we've had letters from Eton College, we've had letters from Buckingham Palace, if I can use it, we've had from the Windsor Lifeguards, we've had from a title lady, and then you go down the scale right to a young boy living in a small house in Leicester who said he'd like to have a little Beatle wig because his parents won't let him have an ordinary Beatle haircut.
Mr. Montrose, thank you. There has been a rumour recently that the Beatles themselves wear wigs. Well, having met them only a short time ago, I can emphatically deny that. My own hair, of course, is perfectly natural.
I remember being on television in America when when they first appeared, and I was being interviewed by this man on this chat show who said, these long-haired boys, I mean, surely they're effeminate. Because that time, get your hair cut.
Did you want to get a haircut at all? No. I had one yesterday. That's no lie.
And I said, well, no, I said, I'm worried about you Americans, because at that time they had crew cuts.
The press asked me what I thought about them, and I told them that I thought that eventually they probably would get a haircut.
I said, if you go back to this country when there was the war between the Royalists, the Roundheads and the Royalists, you know, the Civil War.
Yeah.
I said the Roundheads cut their hair off in order to be unattractive to women, to be against sex. And the Royalists kept their hair long because they were great passionate lovers of the ladies. And people said to me in those shows, but you know, they thought they were sort of a bunch of, you know, crazy effeminates who were just stupid. And they were anything but that.
And then, of course, when they went to America the first time, who could believe what happened when they hit Kennedy Airport? It was just, it was phenomenal, just what happened. You couldn't, nobody's imagination could have thought that was going to happen. You'd swear that somebody had gone around and said, you get to that airport, there's a band coming. But it hadn't, it was spontaneous.
Quite a long time, actually. Last time was about 23 years ago. That was the last time I had one.
Have you met any interesting American girls?
Not yet. We're hoping.
What do you think of the police protection you've been receiving here in the city?
It's marvellous. They're doing a great job, you know, looking after us.
Are the crowds as large as you expected?
No, we didn't expect anything like this, no.
What's the most interesting offer you've ever received?
Oh, yes. Had a lot of interesting offers, actually. No comment.
You just mentioned the sort of the Rolling Stones and things, and that time with the long hair and the...
Yeah, right.
So they were quite pally with them, weren't they?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because they're perceived now as being, they was compared as if they were trying to outdo each other all the time. Was there like a friendly rivalry, or was it?
Well, yes, in a way. I remember they used to talk about them, and they loved them, and they used to mix socially. There was no question of not, but they weren't like that. You see, the Beatles had kind of joy about life. I mean, they're great influences in their lives, as John wrote in his books. The influences upon us, and there were people like, you read about themselves, Elvis. John told me about meeting Elvis. They were all looking forward to it. And what was it like? Eventually, he said, "Well, it's a bit boring, really," because he sat around playing them his music.
They go for the Elvis Presley type of stuff, do they? I mean, they go for the older rock and roll stuff?
I think so, yeah, a bit more. It depended really who was in. Depended upon who was in. I can't speak.
Going back to the films and Help, which we were also talking about a few minutes ago, what do you remember about the films? I mean, what do you remember about filming A Hard Day's Night, for example?
Well, Hard Day's Night was extraordinary because nobody knew what it was going to be. And in fact, the producer himself had no idea that it was going to be such a success. And it was filmed in a theatre, La Scala Theatre in London, which is now, of course, pulled down. And when we got on the set, I was playing the television director, and they didn't keep to the script that much. And Dick Lest had about 4 or 5 cameras working at once to catch them looking natural, rather than when you do face a camera, sometimes people first face it, they stiffen up. But to make them look natural, he had about 4 or 5 cameras. You'd be talking in a scene, and a cameraman would suddenly crawl between your legs with a handheld camera, you know, and you just kept going. And in that situation, I walked on the set at one point. I wish those outtakes would appear now. They were extraordinary. I walked on the set at one point in this hairy sweater, and I said to the lads, my line in the script was, "You're late for rehearsals." And they say, sorry, sir, we didn't know," or something like that. But they didn't do anything like that. I walked on the set and I said, "You're late for rehearsals." And the director of the show, and John Lennon said, "You're not a director. You're Victor Spinetti playing the part of a director." But I kept going. And I said, "I am a director. I have an award," I said, "on the wall in my office." And John said, You haven't even got an office. You haven't even got a dressing room. And as I turned to walk away from him, because the camera was now filming John, you see, talking as that. As I turned, I hit the cymbals of Ringo's drums. And Ringo said, "Hey, he's fingering me cymbals." And John then, quick as a flash, said, "Oh, well, then he must be a television director, because television directors are famous cymbal fingerers," using SYMBOL. Straight away in with that pun, if you like.
But I don't see any reason why you can't even pull up the dialogue over the plane shot.
We could not have that shot at all.
I like it.
Now, John on his own, playing the part of someone else, someone who is similar in character to himself, someone who he understands, but in fact a fictional part, a man who has nothing to do with the 60s, a man who was 20 years old in 1940, with none of the pop elements, none of the fans, none of the persona of a 1966 man. I think that's a good step forward, because he can then, if that works, and I'm not one to predict, it's for the audience to say whether they consider that successful. It's a fairly reasonable transition for all of them to play the parts of other people.
Yeah, you've been working with them over the past 2 or 3 years. Now the stimulus of the great pop explosion is gone. Is there a certain sense of sort of dying away of enthusiasm and sort of running down of the group?
Of a dying away of their own enthusiasm?
Yes.
I don't think so. I think their enthusiasms are now being channeled into other areas, like composing for films, like writing, like appearing from time to time as actors, like searching for what they want to do.
A lot of people seem to say that Ringo was very good dramatically in the films that Richard Lester directed, whereas he sort of never really made it to the fore afterwards. I mean, why was that? Was there a good relationship between him and Richard Lester?
Well, yes. There was a tremendous relationship with Dick Lester on that film, with everybody. It was a trying time for everybody. But you know the famous story about Ringo when he was doing that scene in Hard Day's Night, when he was walking along like this with the camera and photographing the kid, is because he'd been out the night before and he was terribly hungover. And he was feeling wretched and awful. And he walked like that, and that became a joy and a most wonderful clown scene, but he was actually absolutely exhausted because he'd had a great night the night before.
One of the first method actors then.
Yeah, right. Oh, he's a lovely man. You see, that's my memory and impression of them. They were great to work with. There was no kind of side, no kind of showing off. They just sat there and they were with you.
Feel about it, Paul?
Delighted indeed. You know, I'm glad everyone's delighted. I love it.
But I mean, is it fun for you? Or?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you know, it'd be fun for you, wouldn't it? You know, if you just woke up one morning and he said, you know, it's great.
Ringo, how did you first hear about it?
Well, we heard about it 6 weeks ago when we got the forms to fill in. And then we knew that we were going to get it 2 days ago, officially.
How did these forms come? What, straight through the post or in the fan mail or what?
I don't, just in brown envelopes. They were delivered by somebody.
Looking back on that now, then, when you see, if you watch the movies now, how do you feel about when you watch them again?
Well, it's difficult to ask me that. I never like seeing myself. I probably would never ever watch this. But I have seen them because it brings back so many memories, like when we were doing Help. I mean, for the first time in history, young people ceased to be Arab or Israeli or Catholic or Protestant. They became Beatle fans, first and foremost. I was standing on a balcony with them in Salzburg when we were doing Help. And there were tens of thousands of young Austrians out as far as you could see, And John said, Vic, come and have a look at this. And the Beatles stood on the balcony, and all of them put combs to their top lip, and all did called Hitler speeches. And all these kids laughed. And it was the first time that the young talked to the young and laughed a ridiculous and awful man like that out of existence. But that was very powerful. So that when the kids began to become Beatle fans rather than nationalistic possible cannon fodder, then authorities got worried.
Their haircut.
And you wanted to imitate them?
Yes, I want to look like a Beatle too.
You want to be like the Beatles?
Yeah, I sing. I go to the American Academy. I want to be a Beatle when I graduate.
What makes the Beatles so good?
I don't know, they're just great, they're adorable, they sing great, and they write their own songs, and all the songs are great. Even the songs that are crummy, they sing great, so it doesn't matter.
Even people that were close to them have written books. One particular man who was very close to them, when we did the play at the National Theatre here in London, said that John Lennon was so out of his head on acid that the whole job was turned over to Victor Spinetti. That is not true. John was at rehearsals. John was working. John came to rehearsals. John wrote the script, but even a man close to him said that. So can you imagine what people outside that circle would say? Inside that circle with those lads, it was just wondrous, and I was very fortunate and very lucky, and I would never, ever, ever do anything to harm that memory.
Were they in awe of the power they had through the media? I mean,
no, they believe it, love. They didn't. They really were not into power. They, as John said, I'm only a songwriter.
The Beatles are now a secret weapon.
I said to him once, I said, John, I said, you have a drawer full of songs that'll be discovered, you know, after you've gone, like not thinking it was going to be that soon. Like when, say, Cole Porter dies or George Gershwin, they find a trunk full of undiscovered, like they've just done with the undiscovered Motown records. And John said, no. I said, what do you do? He said, well, I just ring up Paul and say, hey, Paul, I think it's time we got together and wrote another hit, and we get together and write one.
Did you ever sit in on any of their composing or jamming sessions?
I used to go. I went to the studios once. I never ever. I mean, all right, you don't impose, and I didn't. I mean, one of the greatest compliments of my life, I should think, was that during that time I was asked out to go out with them in the evenings when they were stoned and I was straight. That's not because, of course, one inhaled. I mean, I'm not talking about that at that time, but it just so happens I was. But John said to me at one point, why didn't you come up to the studios, Vic? He said, we're recording Abbey Road they were doing. I said, John, I don't want to bother you. He said, oh, Vic, come on. Only the fucking bores turn up.
We got invited round to watch them record, which we did quite a lot, and watch them record Sgt. Pepper and different albums, and because we stayed friendly with them all along. And this particular day, we went round to Abbey Road, and they put the backing track down for All You Need Is Love. And on the Friday, it was going out live, first satellite showing ever, and it was going all across the world. And the song they were doing was All You Need Is Love, but they had the title, and they had nothing else. And Paul was, particularly remember, Paul had put the backing track down, and he was in the control room with George Martin, mixing everything. And John was huddled up with ourselves in the corner, and George and Ringo running over. He wanted to produce the follow-up to Sorrow, because they love Sorrow so much. And George wanted to play on it. Ringo wanted to play on it, and this was all going well. And the thing that sticks in my mind is Paul kept coming out the control room and going, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but John, have you written any words to this song yet? Now, this was 3 days before it was going out live all over the world. And John kept saying, there's plenty of time. I'll think of some words for that. We've got a title, haven't we? And when it came to the Friday, sadly, we were invited, and we didn't go along to the show because we were doing a gig somewhere. We actually saw it in the dressing room on television, and I couldn't believe the words that he'd written just on the last minute. And you can see them on television. You can see John with the words in front of him. reading these words, he must have quickly jotted down. So somebody as talented as that could just do that. I think that brings it home to everyone, how talented they were in writing songs. I mean, just to write words like that on the spur of the minute is unbelievable.
Do you have a favourite Beatles song or album or anything?
Sadly, well, yes, of course, the most extraordinary one was Sgt. Pepper, Day in the Life of, and then that was the most, the advance in music, but they used to send me them. As the albums came out, I used to get them all the time, with the little notes and things, and I had them all in the house, and there they were. I've never been a collector, but they happened to be there, and they were all nicked. Not by anyone breaking in, by people who'd come to stay, or friends who in the house, oh, we'll have one of these. And eventually I went to look for them one day. I thought, well, there must be some. I've got this record, yes, this album. Oh, they'd all gone. But then kids used to ask for things. I remember getting letters from kids saying, could I have it's George Harrison's birthday, can you send me a candle from the cake? So I said, George, can you give me some of those candles? I send them to these kids, because I know what it's like to hunger after knowing something about people you love, or wanting something, like little thing like that. Cigarette butts, they used to ask for, hair clippings, everything. God.
Would you like to grow up to be a Beatle?
Shut up. Yeah.
Think they're the best there's ever been?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Did you have any other pop star you liked before them?
No. The way they sing, their clothes, their hair, and Ringo Starr.
Well, what's so special about them that makes you come out here on such a horrible day?
Well, they're great. It sounds different. Well, it was before the other groups came out.
Also, another thing was happening around the time was when they'd come back from visiting the Maharishis. Brian Epstein died.
Yeah, right.
So a lot of sort of bad things sort of happened to people around the Beatles during those years and things. I mean, can you remember that time?
No, I wasn't. I knew Brian.
John, where would you be today without Mr. Epstein?
I don't know.
Are you driving down to London tonight?
Yes, somebody's taking us down here.
You heard the news this afternoon, I believe.
Yes.
And Paul's already gone down?
Yes.
I see. You've no idea what your plans are for tomorrow?
No, we'd just go and find out, you know. And
just have to play everything by ear.
Yes. I understand that Mr. Epstein was to be initiated here tomorrow.
Yes.
When was he coming up? Was he coming up in the afternoon?
Tomorrow, just Monday, that's all we knew.
Had you told him very much about the spiritual regeneration movement?
Well, as much as we'd learned about spiritualism and various things of that nature, then we'd tried to pass on to him, and he was equally as interested as we are, as everybody should be. He wanted to know about life as much as we do.
Had you spoken to him since since you became interested this weekend?
No. I spoke to him Wednesday evening, the evening before we first saw Maharishi's lecture, and he was in great spirits.
And when did he tell you that he'd like to be initiated?
Well, when we arrived here on Friday, we got a telephone call later that day to say that Brian would follow us up and be here Monday.
Do you intend returning to Bangor before the end of this conference?
We probably won't have time now, because Maharishi will only be here till about Thursday, and we'll have so much to do in London that we'll have to meet him again some other time.
I think I was doing a play in New York at the time, so I wasn't actually on the scene when that happened, but I remember it, of course, one does, and they were terribly upset. And people said, of course, they were thinking of leaving him and all that at that time, and he was depressed, but I think it was, I think it was an accident anyway. I don't think he intended to commit suicide. It was just, taking sleeping pills. After all those terrible drugs that doctors prescribe. So I wasn't around, I wasn't there then when that actually happened, so I didn't say to them, how do you feel? So I couldn't answer that. We know how they felt. They were in a state of shock. Then Peter Brown took over, of course.
Of course, there's one event that resounds through the Beatle history, and that is John's death. Can you remember what you were doing and how you felt when you heard about that?
Yeah. Yes, I was in bed, and Graham's down. He's here today somewhere. Shouted up the stairs. Then I came running down the stairs and listened to the. Couldn't believe it.
Good morning. I'm Charles Kuralt, and this is Tuesday morning. John Lennon was killed last night. The former Beatle, 40 years old, was shot to death as he and his wife, Yoko Ono, were walking through the great arched entryway of the Dakota, a landmark apartment building where they lived in New York. Police said the man who killed him got John Lennon's autograph earlier in the evening as Lennon and his wife left home, then waited 6 hours to shoot him when he returned. John Lennon was famous everywhere in the world, and after the Beatles years, after his period of recording songs with his wife Yoko, after some years of reclusive life in New York, he was just emerging again into the bright light of celebrity with a new record album. The news of his death comes as a genuine shock to millions of people all over the world who regarded him as a great star. Someone in the crowd in New York, the crowd that gathered outside his apartment last night, said, "It's like a president has been shot." "Heavier," said his friend.
And there was a painting above my bed which he'd given me. And I took it down. I couldn't bear to look at it. And it went out into the garage. And ages later, I was at some charity dinner. And I offered this painting to the charity to sell, to raise money for it. I said, it's in the garage. And they never collected it. And years later, I thought, my God, it's back up now. I took it up and I thought, well, there it is. It's in a flat in London at the moment. What do you feel about it? You see, there he was feeling that he was safe in New York. He could walk the streets, but he was coming back to England. He was coming back that Christmas.
As news of John Lennon's killing spread through New York, fans gathered at the gates to his apartment. The shooting happened just after Lennon and his wife Yoko stepped from a chauffeured car after returning from a recording session. The killer, who 6 hours earlier had obtained Lennon's autograph, shouted his name, then fired 5 shots at close range. Eyewitnesses said the assassin made no attempt to run away and was smiling as police arrested him. Cradled in the arms of his wife Yoko, the former Beatle was rushed to Roosevelt Hospital a few blocks away, where extensive resuscitation efforts failed to revive him.
I'm certain that he was dead at the moment that the first shots hit his body.
Beatles fans kept up their vigil throughout the night, some singing, others overcome by their grief. One of the first visitors this morning to the Lennon apartment was another former Beatle, Ringo Starr, who'd flown here from Europe after hearing the news. He was taken through a side entrance to avoid the crowds. By mid-morning, the gates of John Lennon's luxury apartment block had become a shrine. People came, one by one, to place flowers and photographs of John Lennon on the iron-barred gates. Some of the people have been here all night. Others have just drifted away from their office for half an hour or so to stand vigil. But all of them wanted to express their sense of shock and outrage.
I can hardly talk. I can't even believe it really happened. John Lennon was the greatest person in the world.
And then you see, what they should do, I think, I shouldn't preach, but then I'm going to say this. Anybody who assassinates, murders a famous person in order to become famous, what they should do is the minute that they achieve what they think is instant fame, you take their name away and you only refer to them as Mr. or Miss or Mrs. X. For the rest of their lives, nobody ever will know who they are. Then they'd never do it again.
We have arrested Mark David Chapman of 55 South Kukui, Kukui Street, Hawaii, for the homicide of John Lennon.
Investigators told reporters that Chapman arrived in New York about a week ago and had been seen loitering around the apartment building where Lennon lived.
He was able to obtain an autograph on an album from Mr. Lennon as he left for the recording studio where he was going.
It's a terrible thing, wasn't it?
It was. It's a tragedy.
Well, that was a terrible thing. That was dreadful.
How did that change the other Beatles at all? I mean,
became security conscious, I should think. Well, George did say he was afraid to go anywhere. I went to the cinema at one time during that period, and Paul and Lyndon, they had people with guns.
I was very shocked, you know. It's terrible news.
How did you find out about it?
I got a phone call this morning.
From whom?
From a friend of mine.
Are you planning to go in before the funeral?
I don't know yet.
Do you know, have you discussed the death with any of the other Beatles?
No.
Do you plan to?
Probably, yeah.
What were you recording today?
I was just listening to some stuff, you know, I just didn't want to sit at home.
Why?
Well, I didn't feel like it.
What time did you hear the news?
It's this morning sometime.
Very early?
Yeah. You don't know, yeah? Drag, isn't it? Okay, cheers. Go on, let's go.
The same thing happened with Richard Burt and Elizabeth Taylor. They were threatened. They had death threats during the 60s. They had to go around with people looking after them. It was dreadful. But with John particularly, who was, I don't know what went on with all that. Was it, I mean, did you read the trial of this man? Was he ever tried? I won't mention his name, but was he ever tried? Did anything happen in public about it? He was just suddenly disappeared. I think it was a plot.
There's all sorts of theories about the CIA, because they were in the FBI, they were watching.
Oh, yeah, of course, of course. Well, of course they were watching. I mean, don't forget, he was talking to people like Malcolm X. He was actually involved in peace marches. Remember the bed peace thing in Amsterdam?
Why do you have to have violence to compete? I mean, you can run a race without killing somebody, you know.
Well, when the Beatles were the top in their singing career, there was violence there. Well, there was violence there, wasn't there?
Yeah, but I think violence is not something you can just say, oh, we're not going to have it, you know. But I think it can be channeled. We're saying, this is one other way of doing it. This needn't be the way for you. But you think of something better. Don't criticize. You do something about it. We're doing something. You know, do something else besides create more violence.
In other words, you're sitting here in bed because it's non-violent.
Yeah, it's an example of non-violence. Yeah. And it's the most functional way John and Yoko could imagine to do it. And we thought about it a long time.
Is this more popular than the one that you had in Europe?
I couldn't judge its popularity by half a day, you know. I'm not sure what you mean by popular. But it was pretty much like this. And if the results are as good, well, that's okay by me.
Instead of going out and fight and make war or something like that, we should just stay in bed. Everybody should just stay in bed and enjoy the spring, you know.
That's right. War is over if you want it, he said, and it's true, but we don't want it, so we love it. You got me feeling quite heavy now about it, and it wasn't like that with him at all. It was quite joyous and fun. It was great conversation, good talk for hours.
While you're in bed and you're giving your press conferences in pillowcases and all that, are you laughing at us?
No. No more than you're laughing at us, you know. I mean, we have a laugh. We think it's funny that the front page news should be the fact that two people went to bed on their honeymoon. We see the funny side of it. And that in Vienna, which is a pretty square place, there's all these beautiful photographs of microphones being held to a bag, you know, to wait for the bag to speak.
It's rather nice, you know.
But we're serious about the peace bit, you know. And as we said here in Amsterdam, the laughs. If we make people laugh, that's enough, you know.
I remember sitting in his house once, we were watching a movie. And suddenly, from nowhere, the police arrived and smashed into the house, really looking for drugs. And I think we were smoking cigarettes. I mean, cigarettes.
Like a cigarette?
I don't smoke at all, thank
They're
you.
going
I'll
up,
have
you
to
know.
give those up,
sir. None of these luxuries.
You don't mind if I smoke, do you?
Bad enough as it is.
I went upstairs, went through the house, pulled everything about, and then all lined up and asked for his autograph. It there was nothing, there was nobody on any drug. I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't, but at that time we were just watching a movie. And we'd talk till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning about things that we're saying now, about, well, all the issues that people feel strongly about, even today. But if you feel strongly about an issue like, for example, peace or war or famine or hunger or why people should go without or why should somebody have everything and some have nothing, and you get into a position of tremendous fame and you say that loudly, some people are not going to like it.
Well, that is one of the most stupid versions of it. Because I mean, that's not a publicity stunt at all. You don't need that publicity. Not like that.
Can I add to that article was originally published in England last March. So it's nothing to do with the, pre-tour.
What he said and meant was that he was astonished that in the last 50 years, the Church in England, and therefore Christ, had suffered a decline in interest. He did not mean to boast about the Beatles' fame. He meant to point out that the Beatles' effect appeared to be, to him, a more immediate one upon certainly the younger generation. And in these circumstances, John is deeply concerned and regrets that people with certain religious beliefs should have been offended in any way whatsoever.
This is Tommy Charles on the air here at WAQY Radio in Birmingham, Alabama. We've got music for you on a beautiful Thursday afternoon.
This is where the trouble all began, here in the tiny top-floor studio of station WAQY, wacky radio to the 750,000 citizens of Birmingham, Alabama.
The Beatles, for a long time, have been able to say whatever they wanted to without any regard for judgment or maturity or the wisdom of it. And no one yet has challenged them to any tremendous degree where it might count.
Charging that Lennon's remarks were absurd and sacrilegious, Charles banned Beatles records from his programs and decided to build a mammoth bonfire to consume the group's records and souvenirs. Tommy, you're quoted as saying that though you're 36, you think like a teenager. Did you find your teenage listeners backed you up on your stand?
They did. For 3 hours, our 3 phone lines lit up, and they responded, and they said, get rid of the Beatles, ban the records, let's burn them or do something with them. And we acted, of course, on our own convictions, but we were backed up by the people, especially the younger people of this area.
Well, I think the Beatles are a real talented group, but I think that they need to watch what they say because they're in such a position that a lot of teenagers that really think of them as something really big, and when they say things like that, some teenagers are going to just believe anything they say.
But are you burning your Beatles records?
Yes, sir, I burn them.
You burn them all yourself?
I've already burned them.
I don't know, I guess it sort of hurt. It sort of hurt people's feelings that, because, everybody thinks so much of them, and, because, they were sort of, the speaking for the teenager, everybody thought they were so good and all that. And then they come up with something like this, and it just sounds like they're making fun of everything that we like.
Our church took a firm stand. Sunday in the morning worship service, the chairman of the deacons made a statement which the deacons in our church had agreed upon, backing the statement that Wacky had said that to ban the Beatles. They thought that this was good, and they firmly believe in everything that can be done to just about ruin the Beatles.
You want to ruin the Beatles?
Well, it really doesn't matter. I think it might be funny, but I guess that's sort of ugly of me.
What difference has all this row made to this tour, do you think? Any at all? Paul?
I don't think it's made much difference. It's made it more hectic. It's made all the press conferences mean a bit more. People said to us, last time we came, all our answers were a bit flippant. And they said, why isn't it this time? And the thing is, the questions are a bit more serious this time.
It doesn't matter about people not liking our records or not liking the way we look or what we say. They're entitled to not like us, and we're entitled not to have anything to do with them if we don't want to, or not to regard them. We've all got our rights,
It seems to me you've always been successful because you've been outspoken and direct and forthright and all this sort of thing. Does it seem a bit hard to you that people are now knocking you for this very thing?
Yes, Richard. It seems very hard. It seems hard. Free speech.
Do you mind being asked questions? For example, in America, people keep asking you questions about Vietnam. Does this seem useful?
Well, I don't know, you know, if you can say that war's no good and a few people believe you, then it may be good, I don't know. You can't say too much, though, that's the trouble.
It seems a bit silly to be in America and for none of them to mention Vietnam as if nothing was happening.
But why should they ask you about it? You're successful entertainer.
That is why they...
Because Americans always ask showbiz people what they think about it. So do the British, you know. Showbiz, you know how it is. But I mean, you've just got to, you can't just keep quiet about anything that's going on in the world unless you're a monk. Sorry, monks, I didn't mean it, I meant actually.
Also, I mean, obviously we have concentrated quite a bit on John Lennon here, but the other Beatles, do you have any anecdotes or fond memories of them going back to your involvement
Oh, they were
with them?
great. I keep saying that, you see, it's so glib to say that, but they were. They opened a door, they stood on that stage, and there was a celebration that went on throughout the world. And it was safe in their hands. It really was. I mean, George saying, you know, you've got to be in all our films, otherwise me mum won't come and see it because she fancies you. There was a kind of joy. They never set about, like, driving a Rolls Royce into a swimming pool or smashing up a hotel bedroom. They weren't into that. Was crap. They weren't into that sort of thing. But they were into really meeting and talking to people. Ringo, you meet him even now. Get a hug, how are you? I mean, you're a good un. That was one of their phrases, you're a good un. Tremendously generous, hospitable. I found them, all those areas, like some of the greatest stars I work with, they've been basically very simple people. I'm trying to think of the anecdotes with them. I mean, you can't separate. I've separated John only in the sense that because I spent a lot of time with him, particularly when we were working on that play, or we went on holiday together, or we should go to the cinema, or go to the theatre, or go out to have meals. So I saw him the most, but I mean, I remember one day going down to spend a day with George, and it was the most wonderful day. There was this room with white curtains. There was George in this white outfit, dhoti, whatever they call those Indian outfits, playing this 1,000-year-old white sitar. And it's only me sitting there saying, listen to this, Vic, it's amazing, this. And I said, George, I can't get it together with Indian music. And he said, well, Vic, you don't listen to it, you let it happen to you. And once he said that, it was fine. It was happening. He said, don't listen. He said, because Western music is maths, you see. It's maths. It's worked out, like QED at the end of it. Da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-dum, bam, ba, da-dum, bam, ba. Indian music is a flow. Lay down your, what is it? Lay down your mind, relax and float downstream. From, I think that's, oh, you couldn't tell me now, but I think it's Rubber Soul. But there again, there's George giving me a present, which I now give to you. If you can't get together with Indian music, don't listen to it, let it happen to you. Now that's a day you would spend with George. Now you think, oh God, didn't you play billiards, or didn't you play, probably, they didn't have Nintendos then, they might have had them, but no, he had this 1,000-year-old musical instrument, trying to play it. His fingers, when he learned to play the guitar, his fingers would bleed, trying to master this instrument. They really were into what they were doing. They weren't amateurs playing at it.
Obviously, they changed a lot. They changed the face of pop music. They changed a lot of people with their ideas. Did they change you a great deal, your involvement with them?
Well, it changed my life tremendously, in the sense that for a while, when those films came out, I couldn't go anywhere. Only because, not because of me, but because of fame by association. I mean, when I was in New York working, I mean, I couldn't go in any, because you see, don't forget, people had seen those films 50 or 60 times, not just once. They knew everybody, not just me in those films, but as happened, I went through the 3 of them. I was only acted to be in them all, and except Let It Be. But so therefore, it did affect you in that way. And of course, my family sat up and took notice immediately because I was working with the Beatles, and my kid brother, Henry, I mean, little, he was what, in his 11, 12. I'd come home from London having done this show or that show or been in this play or that musical, but once I was in the Beatles films, my kid brother practically stood to attention when I came into the house. And he wanted to be a drummer. And so he was talking to me about Ringo and everything. Well, my kid brother was Eric Clapton's drummer for 6 years.
All right.
Henry Spinetti. He's still working. He went with Tina Turner, with all these people, and has played since with Paul and George and all the others. But at that time, that's the first time my family took notice of me, let alone the people in the street. The 60s were a time when the young spoke directly to the young. Didn't never happen before, and it's happening really rarely today. The manipulators are back. But this is the first time when they did speak directly to each other. And when the 60s had it was a time when people felt that anything was possible. Anything was possible. They felt that you could walk up to a soldier and put a flower in the rifle barrel, and that might change it. People talk about flower power. They talk about all those things, talk about hippies. But it was really a time when there was a tremendous air of gentleness around. Of course, there were the riots in America, in the universities.
Let's go! Let's go! British Trump! Let's go! British Trump! Let's go!
Orange Order! And the Orange Order is a sectarian organization Anglos out of the north! Let them resign!
People wanted to change things. They wanted to actually say, look, can we change it without and not go into any political credo, not change to become an ist, like a communist or a Marxist or whatever, but can we just change to be what the idea at that time was, to be human being, rather than anything else. I know it's easy to say it, what I'm saying now, but it certainly, you felt it was possible it could come about that countries, people would cease to be nationalistic.
Well, I'll get the transparencies to you, or to the studio. Tomorrow afternoon. All right, fine. Okay, bye. I suppose they can get together every so often making an LP for the sake of nostalgia or something, but I think Lennon and McCartney could very well become the Rodgers and Hammerstein writing team for films and for musicals and for songs generally. I mean, if there's any doubt about that. I think they're not stuck in a rut of the Liverpool sound or beat or anything like that, and some of the recent records or recent songs have shown that. I think they're capable of great things in the writing field. Ringo, I think he could, with the right film part, I think he could probably be quite a good comedy performer.
And George?
He enjoys it anyway, that much I know. George? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. He'd probably open a string of Indian restaurants.
Hey, can I have a word? Are the Beatles going to go their own ways in 1967?
They could be, you know, on our own or together. We're always involved with each other, whatever we're doing.
Could you ever see a time when, in fact, you weren't working together?
I could see us working not together for a period, but we'd always get together for one reason or other. I mean, you need other people for ideas as well, but, you know, and we all get along fine.
Will you be doing films on your own next year?
No, I don't want to make a career of it. I did it just because I felt like doing it. Dick Lester asked me, and I said yes. And I wouldn't have done it if the others hadn't liked it, you know. They said fine, because we were on holiday anyway.
Do the others have film ambitions on their own?
No, nobody's particularly interested in it. I'm not all that mad on it.
What do you really want to do? I mean, do you write songs?
I don't know, I just want to do a few things, you know.
Yeah. And you haven't really decided exactly what...
No, I'll try a few things, you know, but I just found out a bit more about films doing that. You know.
What's the songwriting thing will keep going on whatever happens, will it?
Yeah, we'll probably carry on writing music forever, you know, whatever else we're doing. Because you just can't stop. You find yourself doing it whether you want to or not.
But do you think the tours, like the American tours and the English one, you know, the stands in England...
You know, there must be a point where they don't work anymore because they're not to do with what we're doing, record-wise or film-wise.
They completely changed people's lives. They gave young musicians the kind of confidence to go on and do the thing, you know, no matter what, keep going, you know. They got bands that write their own stuff. Because although Buddy Holly had done it, and Chuck Berry, they were the only ones. It was the Beatles doing their own stuff. That to me is, but that's what art's all about. Creativity, and that's what the Beatles were. And what I love today is when you're in America at a convention, and you go there, and it doesn't matter who they are, they can be bank managers, solicitors, lawyers, politicians, they all are gobsmacked and smitten by the Beatles. And they treat me like I'm a kind of like from outer space, just because I knew the Beatles, you know. And it's the effect. You'll see, you'll go to a convention, and you'll see 3 generations coming there hand in hand, and they're all Beatle fans. You got kids of 5 that are massive Beatle fans. The record #1, the recent album now, those kids haven't got the knowledge of the Beatles from the parents. They found the Beatles for themselves, and they look upon it as their music. Now I'm in America, I know. And there's a big groundswell, even bigger than it was 40 years ago. And I think that you're going to have young kids singing Beatles songs at Beatle conventions in 1,000 years.
I certainly never felt jealous of the adulation that the Beatles got from fans and other bands, because I was a fan. And you know, people will tell you I'm probably one of the biggest Beatle fans ever to this day. So I was never ever jealous that we weren't as good as the Beatles, or we didn't have as many fans, because we didn't. No one deserved to have as many fans, and no one deserved to have the adulation that they had, because no one was within a mile of them as a band, musically, vocally, songwriting-wise, everything-wise, image-wise, everything. They had it all.
People even today, well, as we are talking now, we're still, the magic, the sound that they made, we're still talking about it.
Half the people watching this are going to be saying, oh, what's he saying, what's he saying? You know, that you are being run by people who are insane, and you don't know.